This is Tell Me Exactly. I'm your host, Meridith Jensen. And today we are telling you exactly all about the user experience with Protocol 41, Caller in Crisis. I have some guests today with me that are going to speak to the experience of using this new protocol since it went live in April of 2024. First joining me is Darren Judd. Darren, say hi and tell us about yourself.
Hi everybody, I'm Darren Judd. I'm one of the protocol experts with Priority Dispatch. I've actually been with Priority Dispatch for over 8 years now, full-time, heavily involved in development of the Caller in Crisis protocol. Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks, Darren. Also joining me is Brandon Miller. Brandon, say hi. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks for having me. I'm Brandon Miller. I'm the Executive Director with the Illinois Valley Regional Dispatch Center in North Central Illinois. I've been there 4 years as the Executive Director, and I'm excited to be here.
And Illinois Valley is triple discipline users of our systems, correct?
That is correct, and we just achieved Police ACE.
Woot woot! Police ACE.
On a mission for fire and medical.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you.
Also joining me is John Ferraro. John, say hi and tell us about yourself.
Hello, thanks Meredith. My name is John Ferraro. I am the Executive Director at Northwest Central Dispatch System. I've been there since 2015. I actually started my career there in 1993, but was lucky enough to return. Northwest Central dispatches for 13 communities in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. We have a population of about 547,000 people, and we do police, fire, and EMS, but we're also a double accredited EMD, EFD, double ACE.
Double ACE, whoop whoop. All right, good. So the reason I invited all of you gentlemen to speak to me today is to talk a little bit about maybe some updates from the user perspective of Protocol 41, which is, of course, our first-party caller in crisis. Again, we went live with this protocol in the versions that we released in April of 2024. And we've already done an episode where we talked about what that protocol is and the different ways to implement it and the training available and things like that and the benefits of it. But today we wanted to bring you guys in because you are kind of newly adapted to the system and you have lots of experience and different insights to share. So Brandon, I'm going to start with you because I know that you went live with this when?
Pretty early on, so I believe it was a few months after go live. We were one of the first agencies, I think one of the first 8.
Yeah, Brandon's group was within the first 8 or 9 agencies to go live, yes.
Excellent.
So the benefit for us is we're a smaller agency, so the training went pretty smooth because my telecommunicators could do it while they were on the console during downtime.
Right.
And after we went live, we dove right in, had a couple calls right away, and the dispatchers really just went with it. They love it. It arms them with the tools they need to be able to help somebody when they're in crisis calling 911.
Yeah, which in all the traveling that I do around to different agencies all over the planet, one thing that is the most common when I talk about this topic of callers in crisis is the dispatchers feeling that they just really don't have the tools available. They're afraid of these types of calls, right? To be frank, because they're afraid of what they are supposed to say. They don't know what to say. They're afraid of making it worse. And how has the experience with your dispatchers been? Has that alleviated some of those fears?
It has with some of it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get a lot of calls.
Okay.
Unlike John, who serves over 500,000 people, we serve a population of 45,000 people. So we don't get a lot of calls, but when we do get the calls, they're able just to jump right in, talk through it with the person, and either move them over to 988 or they're able to send the responder.
Yeah, okay. Now, John, I think your agency has adopted this protocol a little bit more recently. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we went live on July 8th, and one of the reasons is it did take us longer to get everybody trained and have this implemented. So we have a staff of 73 telecommunicators, and what we really wanted to do is, after we kind of figured out in advance how many of these calls were actually going to come in and how many of them would qualify for Protocol 41. It wasn't that frequent, so we wanted to make sure, since this was like really a low occurring thing, that everybody got not just the Protocol 41 training, but then we ran them through one-on-ones with scenarios. And actually, Meridith, we thank you because, and I know, Darren, you were part of this. We used some of those initial scenarios that you gave us to, sort of expose them to what they're going to be hearing. And it really worked, and that really made them comfortable. They liked the Protocol 41 training, my telecommunicators, but I think that one-on-one scenario-based training kind of came over the top and really helped them feel a little bit more comfortable. In addition, what we wanted to do is something I think that was pretty unique, which is we built it into our GIS layer, into our CAD layer for a 988 transfer, and that, kind of helped them in CAD see exactly when it was going to be time to go from Protocol 41, and then it became a 988 transfer here in the state of Illinois, and that extra training really helped them feel comfortable as well. So yeah, it was a successful go live, and I think that we also worked with our medical director about, there's certain questions in the background that can be turned off and on. And our medical director really gave us a lot of guidance on what he thought would be best there. So it's worked out well since July 8th.
So Darren, I'm going to turn it over to you, because one thing that John said that you and I were kind of discussing as a topic for this was the call volume, that dispatchers have a tendency to have kind of a fear of this type of call because they feel ill-equipped for it. But then when you actually look at the numbers, the call volume, as you said, John, there's not that many, which is a good problem, right? We don't want a ton of these calls coming in because of the nature of what they are. Can you share some statistics of, how much this is being used with all of the user agencies that we have on board at this point?
Right now, we've processed probably about 450 calls through this protocol. We knew when we developed it, or that's 450 that we're aware of through the data center and everything. Right. We don't know about the other ones. When we developed this protocol, we knew it would not be one of the highest used protocols. And that's why we went into so much detail and so much training and everything, because even though it wouldn't be used that often, it's a very important protocol, probably one of the most important ones for the call takers. So with the development of that, we was very careful with the emotional control tool, making sure they had the tools and the access to everything they needed to handle that caller appropriately. Because like you said, Meredith, one of the things that we heard from a lot of call takers was they didn't want to say the wrong thing to that caller. So when we were developing the questions with the team of experts and everything, that's what we took into consideration a lot. So yeah.
Yeah. So Brandon, being from a smaller agency, how have you handled that with your dispatchers, being that they're not going to use this very much? They might not even really use the protocol as a whole that much. How do you make sure that they keep their skills sharp?
So we did the initial training, and then we built it into our yearly training regiment, expecting them to do similar to what Northwest Central's doing with the scenario-based training. Obviously, it's part of the college and that type of thing. So that's how we're.
And then I know that in the state of Illinois, there are some legislation measures, some initiatives for how these types of calls are handled. Maybe you guys can speak to how that makes the state of Illinois a little bit unique, or how you have maybe kind of worked this into a solution for that.
Sure. So there's an act, it's known as CESA, and basically what it says is if there's a psychiatric call where there are no weapons, no violence, no illegal substances, or no suicide with a plan, that in those cases, instead of sending an ambulance and police like we normally have done since the beginning of time, we'll transfer that call to 988. So that's a big change in the world of 911. I mean, I can only speak to Illinois, but I'm sure it's a change everywhere in the country. And so what was great about Protocol 41 and frankly ProQA in general is that the state came up with a response matrix that had like 4 quadrants, and it basically ranges from police and ambulance response to just a transfer to 988. And within those quadrants, there's different criteria. Well, we were able to, with your help, Meridith, and several of us from the state of Illinois, were able to program the back end of ProQA to match up to what those matrix level decisions are. And we were able to make it very clear to the telecommunicator when something is a transfer to 988. And then at that point, after they transfer to 988, it's phone counseling, or 988 is actually dispatching a mental health care unit. So it's worked out really well and pretty seamless with both Protocol 41 and an EMD Protocol 25, because it's basically that matrix that the state of Illinois designed has been put into the back end of ProQA, and it makes it very easy for the telecommunicator to follow through all the questioning and what's been approved by our medical director, and then get to a send point, which is either send an ambulance and police like we normally have, or get to a send point where it's actually transfer this call to 988.
Right. And Darren, I'm going to go back to you. Based on the data that we have from the data center, we're seeing that these calls are kind of split across two different categories here, right? Most of the calls that we've gotten so far in Protocol 41.
Well, and it's, like you said, they are split, but it's a big change for a lot of agencies. I'm working with one state right now that they have on legislation in their state that if somebody calls 911 for medical, they will automatically get an ambulance. Well, they're working through to change that legislation because they agree with Protocol 41. There's a lot of calls, and a big percentage of their calls that they get in do not need an ambulance on these mental health callers.
Right. I know that I pulled the stats the other day on Protocol 41, and I think over 40%, it's something like 42 or 43% of the calls that we have as a part of our data center for Protocol 41 are in that omega level. And so those would most likely qualify for these transfers to alternative resources.
Right, as long as there's no violence or weapons mentioned, those are the ones that are encouraged, and even some agencies are actually transferring the alpha level, the alpha 1, to some of these for the non-recent injury, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big change, but I think it's a beneficial change for everybody. We've actually got some centers now that have actually located a 988 employee within their 911 center. So, working with mental health.
Wow. That sounds like a really creative way to handle those calls, to be able to really cut down the time for those transfers and things like that. Wow, I wish that we could have that at every agency. Maybe that'll start to spread a little bit. One of the other things I noticed when I was pulling the statistics on these cases that we have from the data that we have available is that the other end of the spectrum, right? I said it's kind of split between omegas and then the deltas. Now, the deltas are going to be those patients where it's an imminent suicide potential, meaning those are the calls where we are actually maybe impacting and saving a life, right? And so I found that really interesting, that that's kind of the two ends of the majority of our calls are either in that delta category with an imminent suicide potential, which of course we're not going to be transferring anywhere. We're going to be, sending someone as quickly as possible. And then the other side being maybe the way to save some of our resources and use some of these alternative responses. What kind of an alternative response do you have available to your agency, Brandon?
So as John mentioned, the CESA mandate has kind of, one thing that at our organization, and I'm sure John can speak to this as well, is it's opened up a relationship for us to develop with our mental health crisis responders. We didn't have that prior to this, so there's the Protocol 41 training, the ProQA with the additional Protocol 25, and if you're police users, the protocols that fit into those on the police side. It's actually allowed us to develop relationships with these responders out in the field, which we didn't have before. Some of our police partners had those, but we did not. So we're having regular meetings with them. The mobile crisis team is aware of how the calls are screened. We've showed them the protocol so that they understand that we're asking about weapons and if they've already acted on the plan and, the substances, as John mentioned, all of those things play into it because it's very unique for the dispatchers to now be essentially sending a different type of responder to a 911 call. I mean, we've had to take a step back in our organization, and what we've been teaching the dispatchers is there's now a fourth pillar of response. We have medical, police, and fire, but we have to understand that there's a fourth pillar of response, which is our mobile crisis teams. And that has kind of helped them understand that they understand now that they have training. They know things about people sometimes that we don't even know if they know an address or a name or something. Then when they're being transferred, they have some insight. If there's things being said or they don't have enough information, that they will call us back and ask for, a police escort or something similar to that. So we just had to change the way we look at things, which is very hard. It's ingrained.
It's always hard.
It's always been police, fire, and medical, and we've always sent an ambulance and a police officer to these types of calls when there are times now that you step back and realize that there was never a need for that. It's better handled by mobile crisis.
On top of that, one of the things that we dealt with, or that we continue to deal with, and I don't know if you guys have dealt with this in your areas, it was a struggle for some of the agencies to assign police units or law enforcement to medical codes. They're like, we have to send medical or fire, and it's like, no,
you don't.
You don't. You can send whoever.
You can send whoever you want to
the
any
most
of these.
appropriate resource to that, whether it's law enforcement, mental health, or whoever. So that was, I know, a challenge for some agents.
Yeah, and it's all about just educating and kind of training. You spoke a little bit, John, about how we helped in the background to kind of map some of these codes so that they could be used for, data purposes. We map them to the condition codes that a lot of people that are using our protocols that's probably one of the most underutilized features in our systems.
I actually think that it was easier than any of us expected, right?
Yeah.
So we were very pleased when we had, I think it was well over a year ago, we're sitting in a room in Bloomington, Illinois, and all of a sudden the epiphany came that this wasn't going to be as difficult as we thought, because that was our concern from the beginning, was just making sure that the telecommunicator experience was the same.
Right.
That they weren't going to have to do something different, add questions or anything else. And I think that helped the state as well. But I do think it's still evolving. The good thing, and I think we give the state a lot of credit for this, is we meet with the state every single week, and we produce our data to the state, and we review it, and we review calls. And they have questions about why things were not transferred to 988 for a mobile health, mental health care unit. And there's been some back and forth, and at times it's even been, a little bit like we want it this way and they want it that way. But the communication is there, and so we're getting through it. So I could see what's gratifying about what you just said is that I could see in the future that we might have to make some changes to the back end of ProQA, and now it doesn't have the fear that, oh my God, we're going to have to make all these wholesale changes. We just make a few changes. And I think, Brandon, you caught on so quickly. You're like, yeah, I did it already. I think we weren't even out of the building. And you're like,
Yep.
Here's the spreadsheet. This is what I did. And it was just so helpful. And so it just really kind of, took care of some of our concerns and fears going in that day. And it's kind of been as billed and as promised. So it's worked out really well for us.
All right, so the last thing that I just want to ask you guys about is, how are the dispatchers receiving this and how are they feeling about it? First, the training, because I got to tell you, I sat through the training, and one of the first thoughts that I had was, oh my gosh, I wish I had this in my hands 25 years ago, right? So what are you hearing from the dispatchers from the floor? Are they loving it? Are they still kind of learning their way through it? How's it been for them?
So for us, we're a newer user, what I would consider, of the protocols. I'm sure John's agency it's ingrained. We started in 2022 in right after Navigator of 2022, we went live with all 3 protocols. So even today, some of the culture is still being built around structured call taking. So they welcomed the new protocol. They welcomed the additional training because it was I think it was very straightforward. It was very informative. It was interactive. So it kept their attention because some dispatchers can be easily distracted.
Right.
And again, we were able to do it right on the floor during our downtime because we're a smaller agency. We were afforded that luxury. They do seem to love it. I hear, and it's horrible to say you love it, but it empowers them, through the protocol and through the emotional tool to have everything they need in the midst of a call like that, because they do not happen that often, and it's imperative that they walk the person through, potentially a life-saving event.
Right, absolutely. John?
Yeah, I think our staff is used to, like, when we get the next version of EMD or EFD, they're used to some changes. And so telling them, hey, this is the protocol and we have to follow it, and then giving them that training helped. The one-on-one training really helped as well, just to kind of, a lot of telecommunicators, not just at my agency, but I'm sure, around the country are always concerned about liability. And sometimes incorrectly so. I mean, this is a state law here in the state of Illinois that we will follow this and eventually get to a 90-day transfer if it's applicable. So we told them that Protocol 41 was sort of the vehicle to get them there. And we kind of explained that there's no liability here. This is what we're required to do. But people are nervous. Our staff is nervous about this concept of, we're really doing a lot of the care and we're not sending a paramedic. And that's, like, as you said, Brandon, the first time ever, right, that we're not sending police, fire, or EMS.
Right.
So just some apprehension and some nervousness about this huge change. But they also, I think, thought it was going to happen a lot more frequently. And so now that it's, we are generating a weekly report. We take about 5,500 calls a week. And this report generally has anywhere between 10 and 15 calls on it a week. So that's a very small percentage of our total call volume. And so now the latest feedback that we're getting is, can we go over this again? I'd like to go through the scenarios again because I haven't had one yet. And I hear that other people have had them, and I want to do well. So our supervisors, our operations managers are sort of, getting back into it and setting time aside for some one-on-ones.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, gentlemen, and talking about this topic. Would love to have you back and hear how it's going again sometime in the future. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to let us know what you liked and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Look for @TellMeExactly to get the latest on all things emergency communications. Tell Me Exactly is a Priority Dispatch Corporation podcast developed by our team of protocol experts and hosted by me, Meridith Jensen, with Cody Ekman as producer, Reading Roberts as sound engineer, Scott Robinson and Jason Barber as executive producers.